Hello, everyone, and welcome to day two and our final session of our Learning Redefined conference hosted by Showbie. This is Showbie's first conference, online or face-to-face. Actually, it's our first conference, so it's been a phenomenal 2 days so far. And for those of you that are joining us that don't know about Showbie, just a few words to say that it's actually a hybrid learning platform. There's over 3 million educators globally that are using the platform. It's very focused on providing a richer, deeper, more personalized feedback. Showbee's been working with educators for almost 10 years now, and it's got some really amazing partnerships with a variety of different apps and tools. If you want to know more about Showbie and what it does, and Socrative as part of the assessment offering as well, go to showbie.com and you'll be able to kind of find a lot more information about Showbie there as well. However, kind of moving on with today's session, I'd like to welcome Rachel Walker for this particular discussion. And this particular discussion is going to be very much focused as part of our kind of educator stream. So we've got an educator every day, and today I'm kind of really privileged that we've got Rachel joining us. Rachel has been using technology, I know, for a number of years. I've kind of followed her on Twitter. I've kind of seen some of the work that the trust has been doing as well, and one of your trust leaders was here earlier on in the previous session. You're a musician, you're a maths teacher, computing lead, and now a new mummy as well.
Yeah, just come off maternity leave a couple of months ago, so just getting used to parenting.
Wonderful. So Rachel, that's kind of a short introduction from my perspective, but it'd be great for you to kind of tell our attendees and people that are watching, a little bit about your school, your background, where did you come from, your kind of role at the moment, and so on. Over to you.
Great. Well, hello everybody. It's lovely to be able to talk to lots of you about technology. Technology in education is absolutely my passion, and it's going to be a struggle to limit us to half an hour, but I'll do my best. Like Abdul said, I've been working at Sneinton for Sneinton School in Nottingham. It's an inner city school. We've got a really demographic of families that access our education, and we're a part of Transform Trust, which is an ever-growing trust, a really big one, in Nottingham and Derby area in the UK. So we've got, again, a diverse range of schools. Every school, even though they're quite close, some of them, they seem to meet a really different need across the whole trust. So it's really interesting working with other teachers in other areas, and actually how we're using technology seems to be different for our different communities. When I first arrived at Sneinton, we had an iPad trolley that was sat in the corridor, and a couple of people using it for the odd coding lesson. But other than that, it was great for me because I basically just adopted it into my classroom and went, thank you very much, I think I'll use those. And we went from there, really. I just started to experiment with different apps with my class. I think I was an NQT that was just quite keen to try things out generally, not just with technology. But being part of a very forward-thinking school was definitely a real advantage for me, and we've just been nominated as one of the creative schools of the year for the TAS awards as well, just this last couple of days. So just thank you. I think, yeah, for us it's just we're all about being creative practitioners, and that translates across all of our curriculum. But I think particularly with technology, you've got such an amazing tool in your hands to really try that kind of thing out and make it really effective. So
brilliant. So Rachel, what does learning look like in your classroom? Like, what does the workflow look like? Students coming in, and obviously if they have an iPad now and you're using Showbie as well, are you using Socrative as well? Is that part of your toolkit in terms of assessment and stuff?
Yeah, so if I describe, I guess, a unit of work that I've currently been doing with some year fives, I've been teaching in fractions because my role is across two different classes now. I've come back from maternity leave, so I'm teaching some of the gaps in their learning from COVID. So I'm working through a fractions unit, and what I've done each week is done a mixture of lessons using technology and lessons using concrete materials. So, for example, we've been using Cuisenaire rods, but the way that the children would be using those would use Showbie to take a picture of the Cuisenaire rods once they've made a fractions bar, and then they'd annotate it, saying this is a half, this is a third, and then multiplying, adding fractions. We would use the features on Showbie to be able to have a look at that. I absolutely love the feature on Showbie where you can screenshot all of your slides and then upload it as a document, so the children can then literally work on the slides, which is amazing. So I've just really a lesson, the children will follow that through, so there's no worksheets, they just follow the lesson on the slides with me. They will get to an activity and I will have designed the slides. I quite often use a little screenshot of something like the pen, and that will go up at the top, so they know they've got to use the pen on that slide to answer the question, or they've got to use the text box.
Yeah. So that means that I suppose the type of activities that you can set and the ways in which students can respond are probably significantly different, and there's probably a greater variety than what you might have been able to do in the past. Would that be right?
Absolutely. And I think I love about what you get with the things like the photos of the manipulatives is that you hear from every child during that activity, whereas what you normally be doing is going from child to child, going, tell me about what you've made, and asking sort of those well-chosen questions. But actually you can get really deep into the learning when you've got all 30 of them giving you that evidence, and you can really spot those misconceptions really easily as well.
Do the children take the devices home as well?
No, we're not fully one-to-one. So at the moment we've got our sets that stay in school, but that would potentially be something we're looking at in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that would be kind of quite interesting for parents to get involved and be able to kind of see what their children are doing as well. I suppose that would provide a bigger kind of transparency. Now, you're also like a digital transformation lead. Is that in your school? Is that at Sneinton, right?
Yeah, at Sneinton, and then I've worked with other digital leads across the trust to look at how they would roll out their digital strategy as well. So
what does that role involve in terms of being a digital transformation lead? What does that mean?
So I think the role was created because it recognized, initially I was the computing lead, but the role was created because we realized quite quickly that if you're going to have iPads across the school, then you can't just talk about the computing curriculum. Actually, it's about pedagogy. It's about how that applies to maths, to English, how it applies to home learning, but then also you've got things like safeguarding, and all of the e-safety side of things is such the thing that you've got to be dealing with, as well as communication with parents, and then the whole arm of actually staff workflow as well. So something I'm looking at the moment is how we make our workload much lighter just by using technology, and how can I help my colleagues to be smarter. And there's that really cliched phrase, work smarter not harder, which I absolutely hate, but in some ways there are parts of it which are true, and so my role kind of covers all of those different things, and that's why the role was created, really.
That's kind of interesting. So just looking at the workload stuff, are there some kind of quick wins that you're kind of seeing across your school in terms of workload and the use of technology?
Yeah, so we've got lots of things like shared folders where people have got easy access to documents, so we can as the leadership team, we'll all be working on one document, and rather than firing out hundreds of copies of the same thing, actually we all get together, we have a meeting, and we simultaneously add to a document, and it's done by the end of the meeting. So actually that kind of thing is really powerful. That's
really good. Can you share with us any kind of stories of impact, like, specific children, or, the ways in which technology has kind of impacted, or any incidents or stories that are particularly meaningful in terms of, people that are watching and that might be thinking about taking a route with technology and bringing it into their classroom as well?
Yeah, so I would sort of pinpoint my turning point of this is really something I need to pursue would be when I was RQT, it's a year after NQT, and I was trying out augmented reality for the first time using an app called Nearpod, and they've got this amazing slideshow on there which at one point you basically start moving your iPad around and you're under the water, under the sea. And we just had this moment in the classroom. I was doing some writing. The children were going to be describing being under the sea, which of course, storybooks, pictures, you can get so far. But then there was this incredible moment where the children realised, oh, I can move my iPad and I'm under the sea. And all 30 of them got out of their seats and were going like this around the classroom, looking at their surroundings. And the writing we got from it was fantastic, and that was really a defining moment for me of going, I can really see now how this is taking the learning to the next level. Actually, it isn't just about being in the classroom. It's I wrote a blog that was called "The World in Your Classroom," because actually that's now what we've got access to. Is I can take them to a Viking museum, even though we don't live anywhere near one. And those experiences that the children won't necessarily get, real experiences, are incredible, and we'll get those as much as we can. But for those that we can't get, technology is our answer.
Brilliant. And in terms of like just coming back to some more traditional stuff, I think sometimes when we talk about technology, there's always that, and especially if people have not been using it or don't have a one-to-one experience, there's always that thing that, you know, I still need to get my children to write in books and pen to paper and so on. You know, final exam SATs and so on, it's going to be written stuff. Does this mean that they're going to be writing less and so on? So how do you balance that?
So we've made some really quite critical decisions recently about that, because of course lockdown has changed things as well. So we had sort of one set of iPads per key stage before lockdown, and since lockdown we've then had many more iPads, and so and of course all the work has been done online over the course of lockdown, and everyone has been able to suddenly see actually we can evidence the learning in a whole variety of different ways. And it doesn't always need to be pen to paper. And I'd even argue sometimes that getting pen to paper is a hindrance to some of the learning. So it could be in a science lesson, for example, and children would be able to evidence much more scientific understanding if they're a weak writer, if they can just record a voice note. So that kind of thing. But we've always been concerned that you've got that evidence you've got to have, and you've got exams, like you say, at the end of the primary school, and actually that's really important that you have that written evidence. But that's not to say that you can't use something like Showbie, because actually we've got things like writing assessments or end of unit writing. Children can take a picture of what they've been writing physically in their book, and the feedback can be all online. So you're not always writing on an iPad. Actually, the iPad can be there as a reference point, it can be there for feedback, assessment, and all of that. So it can be really powerful.
Yeah, I think that's kind of quite critical, and I'm kind of hearing a similar thing with other educators as well that are using Showbie in the classroom. That they scan the children scan the work that they've done, the handwritten stuff, and then from that point onwards, all the feedback, the toing and froing from students to teachers and teachers to students, that tends to be digital, and the voice notes are actually quite a useful tool, right? Because you can just overlay it on top of anything, and the children can speak as well. And I think that has some significant kind of advantages, especially in terms of not being able to take workbooks home or books home to mark and so on. So yeah, I can certainly see that. What role does technology play in terms of like accessibility, you know, students with additional needs and so on? Is that something that you encounter and you use technology for?
Certainly. I mean, as with everything with inclusion, every child is different, and so we'll have something different that they might need. I had some children in my class a couple of years ago who were really struggling with reading, but we have a whole class reading model at my school, which is really effective for teaching reading. But when you're a struggling reader, sometimes when you get to the independent activities and you haven't got that teacher input the whole time, it can be quite a challenge. So for those children, I used to take a picture of the pages that we were reading, and I recorded myself reading it over the top on Showbie, and then they had headphones in, meaning that when they didn't always have to find it in the text, they could actually listen to it as well, which would then scaffold it and help them to access the learning. I'd do the same with reading out the questions as well, and give a short explanation after each one. So that was really effective. And I used to highlight where it was in the page. So if it was look for this particular word, I would highlight those words. And all of that was just from screenshots or just a couple of photos of what we were reading.
Brilliant. And also, just kind of touching on this, one of the things that I've definitely seen, and I don't know if this is something that you are doing or even looking at, but like especially during lockdown, there was a lot of use of screen recording and tutorials and modeling and so on, that seemed to be like a lifesaver for a lot of kind of schools and teachers and children. But potentially even coming out of lockdown now, moving forward, I think there are teachers that are kind of saying, well, actually, that was really good during lockdown, but it continues to be a really useful tool moving forward. Is that something that you look at or do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting coming back in because I've been on maternity leave basically for the whole of COVID, which has had its own
Right.
challenges, obviously having a baby in lockdown. But it's been really interesting seeing how things that I was doing before lockdown, suddenly everybody's now doing them, because they've suddenly seen the impact. And I've been banging on for ages about flipped classrooms and about how the fact that I had like an on-air sign on my classroom door quite often because it would be first thing in the morning, I'd be recording a video of myself teaching like division or something. But again, I had a bit of a defining moment in one of my classrooms where I was teaching, it was division actually. And a child came up to me, I'd recorded a video of me teaching it. And then I'd said to them, I'm not going to teach you this today. You're going to learn it yourself. Here's the questions. By the end of the lesson, you need to have done the questions. There's a video of me on there teaching you how to do it. Watch it at your own pace. Watch it as many times as you need. And I'm here if you need any questions. And there was a child that put his hand up and I went over to him and he had stopped his video and he said, Mrs. Walker, I get everything up to this point here and then I don't understand it. And that was so powerful because he, and you know, in a lesson, he could have heard everything and then not been able to do anything at all because he'd got stuck at that point. But I was able to intervene exactly where his learning was, correct him, guide him, and then he was able to access the task. And
That
that's
is so
so
powerful.
powerful.
Because it's like they can pinpoint like the cognitive block right at that point, and say this is where I don't understand something. And I think that's human, right? Lots of people, depending on concepts, ideas, and so on, very few people will understand everything all in one go all the time. We have to go and revisit things, and we've got to rewatch things, and we've got to stop and pause and play and so on. I think one thing that's been quite useful around that, and I've heard a number of teachers kind of mention this to me as well, is that even when students were doing this remotely or doing it at home, the fact that they could watch the video and say at 2 minutes 36, I don't understand what's going on, that was really meaningful. And I suppose in some ways that probably frees you up to work with those children that really need the support, right?
Definitely. And I think there's a technique that I use sometimes as well, which is a bit more effort, but actually has a really good impact, which is to record a step before the learning as well. So then I don't just send the video of today's learning, it will be a video of like what they should already know. And so children can actually take themselves back a step to revise whatever they might need before we then do the next step. And yeah, it's just being able to completely take ownership over that is quite powerful.
Oh, that's really good. That is really, really good. And what does assessment look like? Formative, summative, just kind of, quick checks and quick questions in the class to kind of, see after checking for understanding and so on. What does that look like in an environment where every student has access, where you're using Showbie and so on? What's that experience like?
So formative assessment, something that's really powerful is I use Apple Classroom on our iPads, and I get all the screens on view, and then I get the children to use something like the Notes app, or even just a blank slide on Showbie, and then I'll ask a question, and then I ask them to write the answer really big in black, so I can see on my iPad exactly who's got it and who hasn't, and then I group them like that. So that's quite a quick way of doing it. But also on Showbie, I can use things like the class discussion to give feedback. So particularly in English, where the answers won't necessarily be an exact answer. Whereas in maths, if someone wrote the correct answer first, everyone else
Yeah.
could just copy that.
Right.
But in English, you can have different ideas and get children sharing ideas. And so you can use something like class discussion to get them generating ideas. Summative assessment, I'm doing one tomorrow using Socrative. So I've actually used questions from the maths, I think it's called Third Space Learning. They've got some brilliant diagnostic assessments. And so rather than writing my own questions, I've got some diagnostic ones from them and just done a screenshot of each question, put that onto Socrative and just put A, B, C, D. So it's literally
Right.
taken me 5 minutes to create. But what Socrative does, if people haven't used it, is it connects into Showbie. So I can set it up as a task within Showbie. And so they'll go in, I'll click on the link, and they'll take them straight to the quiz. And it will then give me exactly who's done what when. So it will tell me who's got it right, who's got it wrong. I've also thrown in some short answer questions there, like what colour should Mrs. Walker dye her hair, just to kind of make it fun. But also, it's just that kind of, I get an instant assessment from the children, and there's absolutely no marking, which is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and do you use the report feature in that as well, where it pumps out a report for each student? I think that's quite a useful thing.
Yeah, definitely, and just being able to really unpick those misconceptions as well. And yeah, as somebody who likes to not do too much work but get lots of information, Socrative really lends itself well to that. It's really good.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant. So, just kind of like moving on. What are next steps looking like, as an intern and the work that you're doing with teachers? Like, how did you get your teachers on board? How do you maintain, because technology is always changing. There's always some new feature popping up here and there and so on. And I'm not necessarily talking about new apps that come up all the time, because there's always lots of them. But stuff that is really going to impact pedagogy. How do you develop teachers to kind of use it effectively?
Well, the first step for us was engagement, to make sure that everyone was actually on board with this as a vision. And so there were kind of a two-pronged attack to that. The first was to give everybody an iPad, and that wasn't just teachers, that was support staff as well. That was absolutely critical for us. Our learning support staff are essential for our school. We couldn't function without them. And they needed to be on board, because when teachers set cover work and they use Showbie, our LSAs need to know what to do. So if they weren't using it, they didn't have an iPad, they wouldn't be able to do their job. And so that was critical. There's that wonderful thing of giving everybody a new toy. You instantly go, oh my goodness, yes, all right, I'll get on board with this vision. So that was sort of the first thing that we did. Second thing is leading by example. So it was really important that people knew what the power of the technology was. And so I spent a lot of time doing open classrooms, inviting people in to see what was possible, running staff meetings where I was sharing ideas, sharing stories of impact, telling people this is what workload could look like if you maybe shifted a few things, and almost convincing people that putting in the time for the learning and the training was definitely going to be worth their while. And I think once people tried it out for themselves, they were able to start to see the impact and go, okay. And it was just starting with really simple things. So for example, using an Apple TV and an iPad as a visualizer. So just setting it up in the classroom where they could take a picture of a child's work and have it on the screen and talk about it. It didn't need to be much more than that, but actually they could instantly see how they had a mobile visualizer because they could walk around the classroom with it. And it was something really small. It was just a tweak, but already had an impact. And so starting with that was really important.
Brilliant. And also, just like compared to 6 years ago when you discovered the iPads that you could use, to where you are now, obviously the trust, the schools had a vision around that change and slowly embedding this across the school and so on. What would you say, what would you say the impact has been on the children, in terms of their learning and so on? Are there things that are kind of quite measurable? I'm not saying that put technology in and suddenly you get brilliant stuff going on, but in terms of pedagogy, what are the things that you can do now that you weren't able to do before? What's the impact on children's learning?
So I would say I mean, the interesting thing is almost any time you get the iPads out, you've instantly got an engaged class. They want to learn, they want to be involved in whatever it is you're doing because you're using the iPads. And even this many years on, it still has that element of excitement about it. And I think something that's really changed for me has been when I'm in class, it's like they're native now. The iPads, they've got this sense of, oh, I could just do with another word for enormous. I'm going to go on thesaurus.com and I'll find another word, or I'll just ask Siri how to spell this word, or I'll just quickly check something online because I want to add some more facts into my science piece of writing, whatever it happens to be. It's given us all those opportunities, and children just do it naturally now. I was in a year 4 class the other day, and children were just using the voice dictation to record what they wanted to write by dictating it to the iPad. They could then see it. They had it on Showbie, meaning the following lesson, when they were doing their actual writing, they didn't forget what they'd done the previous day, and it was all in one place. That's just become second nature now. And looking back to 6 years ago, none of that I knew about. I didn't know any of that, but now it's just become part of our practice.
That's brilliant. About getting teachers on board, like obviously you've kind of, you've spearheaded the journey, you've been making in the classroom and so on. So how did you get teachers on board? What was it like with Showbie, kind of, getting teachers trained up? Was that massive training issue? How did that work? How did you get everybody on board?
So initially, I kind of identified people who were also what we call early adopters. So people who were really keen to get cracking, and they saw ideas and they went and did it straight away. So I kind of pinpointed those people and gathered a team. And initially I said, right, I'm going to need your help because I can't do this on myself. And also people by that point were starting to do things that were different to me as well. So it's not about the Rachel show. This was about us as a team doing what's best for our school. Yeah. So other people were doing things that were perfect for Key Stage 1. And I'm not a Key Stage 1 teacher, so it was just amazing to see what they were doing. So it was really important to get people from across the whole school to be part of that vision. So I made sure there was a representative from each Key Stage and from the support staff, as well as the teaching team and from senior team as well. So it was really a whole school approach from the very start, really. And then beyond that point, it was drip feeding it in. Rather than doing loads and loads of training on this is how to use Showbie, it was more in a staff meeting about maths. I would demonstrate how I used it in a maths lesson. And then in another meeting about RE, it would be how did we evidence that using Book Creator? And then it would be something else. You use the year 2s then went and did a green screen thing with the Great Fire of London, where they were pretending to run away from the fire and did first person writing as a result. So it started to kind of feed into the language of the school. Something else that I did, which I picked up actually from Shacklewell Primary, we were mentioning Michelle Thomas earlier before this went live. But something that was really effective that was done there that I've magpied, for want of a better word, is something called a core app, a sort of ring system, which basically means that you're guiding people towards apps that are definitely going to be worth their time investing time in. So we had very critical apps that everybody was expected to know right in the center. And so for us, that was things like Outlook, Showbie, plus Dojo. They all went right in the middle. Everyone's got to get to grips with those. Okay, once you're familiar with those, what's the next level out? And so I would, and you go like that. And so on the outside, it was things like Padlet, which is amazing, but not an essential app. But it would just guide people, because if you sit there with the App Store, where do you even begin? You need to know what's good. And actually, there's some fantastic apps out there, but until you've tried them, you don't know whether it's just going to crash in your classroom. I mean, Pic Collage was brilliant, and then they updated it, and then it just crashed every time we used it. I had so many upset children because it kept deleting their work, and you need to know that an app's not going to do that in the middle of a class. And so it was really important from a leadership perspective to be able to say, these ones are worth investing in. I'm about to refresh it actually, because our apps have changed as our needs have changed over the last couple of years. And so that's an ever evolving thing, but that was really staff development.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a good approach in that, it's easy for people to manage. They know what apps are core. They know which ones they're going to be using on a day-to-day basis. You can center training around that as well. And then, obviously to revisit it, to kind of just make sure other new tools, new things that are out there that you can use. How do things like moderation work now? Are you using technology for that? Like, before, moderation was kind of like a big, everybody gets in a room, brings all their books, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes coming from other schools as well, and so on. And it's like, has that changed in any way? Does that look different?
I would say, well, we've got a new data tracking system, which is all on technology now, meaning that there's no data submission anymore, which is amazing. So every time we enter data, it goes onto this program called Insights, which then creates bar charts and pie charts galore, which as a class teacher and as a leader is amazing because you get that instantly. Moderation for writing, we've recently changed, and that's changed while I've been on maternity leave, so I'm not that familiar with it, but we use Pobble. And so that's something that we're investigating at the moment. I think it's on a sort of trial basis as far as I understand. But yeah, watch this space with that one.
Fantastic. So if I was to, I just tapped on my phone and I've just realized like half an hour is just already gone. And I could probably carry on with this conversation for much longer. But if you were to give advice to somebody that's a classroom teacher that's just starting off with technology, iPads or otherwise, that might just be starting off with something like Showbie, any top tips for them?
Yeah, I would say get behavior management sorted, because and rehearse what you're going to say if it all goes wrong, and don't be afraid of it going wrong. So for example, if you're going to, you will feel nervous, and it is nerve-wracking starting a new app for the first time. You've got 30 children with an iPad in front of them. Oh my goodness, what are they going to do? So before you even get the iPads out, get yourself a code of conduct. This is how we're going to treat the iPads. This is what we're going to do when we're using them. If I'm caught off task, I'll get a warning and then it's taken off. All of the standard stuff we would do with anything, but really, really make sure that's super clear. And also rehearse what will happen if it all goes wrong and I can't get the app working. A classic example for me was I wanted to do this amazing augmented reality solar system tour for the children. And I said to them, I'm not sure it's going to work. The internet's been really dodgy this morning. If I say go and you can't see it, what are we going to do? And so we actually spoke about the what if, like we spoke about the plan B. And they know me now as saying, oh, there's always another option. There's always another option. And so it's worth just having a backup plan every single time you do something. It doesn't have to be complicated, but give it a go and don't be afraid of things going wrong. Just set yourself up so that if it does, you feel okay about it, rather than it just all flopping and then you don't want to go near an iPad again. It's just worth preparing for plan B.
Absolutely great stuff. Rachel, thank you very much for joining us today. I mean, really appreciate your kind of insight. I'm sure that people watching will be able to take a lot away from that as well. And hopefully, when you're kind of full-time back in the classroom as well, months down the line, we'll try and get you back on to kind of share other things as well, and maybe even show us some examples of things that you've been doing. So really, really appreciate this. And thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.